Adam Gough, you edited Spike Lee's film *Da 5 Bloods* about Vietnam veterans returning to the country several years later. And you worked with Lee also on David Byrne's *American Utopia* and also his short film *New York, New York* that all came out in 2020. So did *Da 5 Bloods* come first in all of that, or was there some overlap between projects?
Yes, no, so, *Da 5 Bloods* was first, and then Spike just keeps himself incredibly busy, and we've just been rolling together ever since. And I'm currently on my third project with Spike, which has not been announced yet, so I'll just call it the untitled third project for the moment. And then a few kind of short form projects with Spike as well.
And had you been familiar with or a fan of Spike Lee's work before getting the chance to go all out working with him so much?
Yeah, very familiar with his work and a big fan of his. So I am a London-based editor, so I grew up in the UK and in Cornwall. So when I got the call, it wasn't something I was expecting at all. So, you know, Spike is Brooklyn-based, and I kind of felt in a completely different universe kind of being invited in, but I jumped at the opportunity. And it was a fantastic experience as well, because it was just after I'd finished Roma. So I was doing kind of like the award circuit stuff at that moment with Roma, and Spike was doing it with BlacKkKlansman. And Spike didn't waste any time. So pretty much before any event where he was at, where I was at, I remember the morning of the BAFTAs, I went down to his hotel and we were plotting some of the montage sequences, and his mind was immediately kind of deep into *Five Bloods*.
And what was that kind of collaborative process like? Because I know you spoke about Roma a lot, how you and Alfonso Cuarón had this very, very close collaboration throughout that process. Were things different with Spike in any way?
Well, Spike is not in the cutting room as often, but he's still incredibly hands-on. Luckily, I know Barry Alexander Brown, who cut *BlacKkKlansman* and many Spike films going back 30 years with him, and he was nice enough to kind of give me a little bit of a heads up. So I kind of met him for a drink one day, and he kind of explained kind of what Spike likes, his workflow. So I went in prepared, or what I thought was prepared, but still Spike is a hurricane of energy. So I had to kind of keep running to kind of keep up with it. But it was an intense collaboration. So during the shoot, he's very involved with editorial. He wants to watch dailies. He wants to see cut. So at the end of a shoot day, he would just come to the cutting room, watch everything from the previous day in the dailies. And I was taking that as an opportunity, with it being a new relationship with a director, to show very early cuts that I was working on, to kind of get the feeling for what he was after. And I'm glad I did that, because in all honesty, at the beginning of *Da 5 Bloods*, I was going in completely the wrong direction of what Spike had in mind stylistically, but it gave me the opportunity to recourse and kind of regroup and get on the right track.
And this being a film that's in many ways about the Vietnam War, and it has a lot of combat scenes and a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts. Does that present a lot of challenges for you as an editor?
Yeah, well, editorially, because of the amount of archive footage we had, there was almost a mini documentary structure in the workflow going on. So we probably had nearing like 50 hours of archive material before we started shooting, just in the Avid, to start going through, honing on the beginning sequence for the opening montage, and then some of the uses later on in the film. So that's kind of split, I had to kind of create a workflow with the assistants, so they always kind of knew what they were handling and kind of passing to me. And then once kind of all those plates were spinning, you kind of just got the balance of it, and that just became part of my day. So dailies would be watch the footage, break that down, also then watch the new archive, break that down, then recut in the footage, getting ready for Spike, and then if I had the time, recut in the archive. So just kind of break stuff down into compartments and yeah, kind of keep going with it. But it did add a lot to the workflow.
And the pacing is so important, obviously, for this film and for any film. But you've got some understated character scenes with the flashbacks, with the modern action sequence in the present day. How was it from like scene to scene, kind of finding the right sort of the movement for this film?
I felt like it came together pretty quickly, but it was just an amount of finessing. So something that I love about Spike's process when he hits post-production is he wants to screen the film weekly. So at the end of every week, starting from week 1 of the director's cut, we would go into a screening room, sit back and just watch it on a big screen and not stop. So you could judge the flow, and it was during those early screenings where I can kind of feel where some of the bumps were and like the emotional tones especially. But with it being Spike, we can change tone on a gunshot. It can just be a single cut and the tension is broken, or you know, we're going from tense to comedy. And sometimes it was just finding the right finesse with the transitional scenes, with them traveling. And it you know, Spike had a very strong idea in his mind what he wanted, which was great that we could start working with it so early during the shoot. But it was just a continuous process all the way up to the very end.
And you know, when you're watching footage as many times and as often as you have to as an editor, do you is it sometimes hard to kind of, you know, do you get a little too close to it and have a hard time, you know, getting that objective distance to know exactly what's right and what's working?
I feel I'm quite empathetic with dailies, so I have quite a strong emotional response very early. Something that I did find fascinating is Delroy Lindo scared the shit out of me. So watching the dailies of Paul, I just found Delroy as such an intense person that I would avoid conversation with him. It wasn't until post, when he came in for ADR, that I actually kind of talked to him properly. But I remember kind of meeting him in a lobby and just being very intimidated because of just watching the strength of his performance for the last couple of months. I just, you know, I was scared of just setting him off.
And the Paul character is so important to the film, obviously, and so much of it is turning on how his character is experiencing the world, and his own personal history. How is it editing that performance and sort of really kind of conveying his emotional journey and in many ways his kind of emotional deterioration at certain points,
Yeah.
You know, through the editing?
Well, I kind of did a little bit of research on PTSD just for triggers, and there's a lot of like things that come up for like sights and like smells and sounds, which is something that, you know, the Chicken Man scene, for instance, in Defy Bloods is completely kind of taken off with that. And then kind of understanding how quickly the triggers act, it actually became quite liberating in the edit to just make it a little bit disjointed, and it gets messy in those places, and we kind of start playing into his mindset. And then later on in the film, there is a moment after they come out of the jungle where they have the first battle. And it was a moment where I stole from another scene that was meant to come a little bit later, where Paul Delroy Lindo runs out of the plane to reveal that Stormy Norman's dead, and created a new kind of like breakdown, because this was just before the moment he was about to leave the group. So it was meant to show his deterioration a little bit more. So with a tiny bit of kind of restructuring kind of to amplify those moments, it kind of came together. But it was, I must admit, I kind of did find it liberating, kind of just with some of the techniques that I could play around with for that.
And with those flashback scenes in general, you're trying to convey a different time, many times the same place, but like a different feel, because obviously it's the active combat situation they're in. Was your approach to those different, wanting to give them a different feel, let scenes like linger differently?
That just came naturally because of the footage. So when you kind of get that grain 16mm, you kind of, that movement as well, it's a little bit more handheld in those places. It just kind of came naturally with those rhythms. But something that was, that came through like the process and editorial, because we only had Chadwick Boseman for 10 days in the middle of the shoot, and those scenes were actually shot on 16mm in Thailand. The turnaround for dailies was 10 days, because we had to fly it back to LA to get it developed. So by the time we get the dailies back, it would be too late if we needed to know if we had to reshoot anything with him. So I actually, for those scenes, I cut them on video tap. So which is the very crappy quality feed that you get out of a 16mm camera, which looks like someone has filmed a film off a cinema using a VHS like VHS tape. It's like super low quality. So I have a feeling that kind of lo-fi old school technique may have introduced a slight early rhythm, like judderiness maybe in those scenes, just from kind of the necessity of having to cut it at so low quality.
And you know, the film builds to this climax at the temple, which is this dramatic shootout. Was that one of the more complicated scenes to edit? Or one of the most time consuming, or did that feel fairly straightforward in assembling?
It again, like was the majority of this edit was going on during the shoot, so I had I have members of the crew, so I come in and sit with me. So the stunt coordinator came in and actually talked me through the scenes, and Tom Siegel, the DP, kind of explained a few of the moments that were in there as well. So having all of that additional knowledge at that stage, I think helped get me through it quicker. But again, this was a scene that just kept developing as well, because there was originally for all of the battles, for anyone shooting a machine gun, the military training was kind of tapping. So it was kind of short bursts. Every gun would be, if it wasn't single shot, it'd be like 5 shots, 5 shots. And then while we were kind of working on the flow, Spike kind of became adamant that he wanted everything to be fully automatic, and just when the battles hit, just for this intensity to continue until the end. So that kind of, with comping visual effects up to kind of keep the gun shooting and then tightening it down, it kind of brought in that even quicker rhythm and pace to it.
Were there any individual scenes or sequences that you found yourself especially proud of in terms of the way the editing sort of enhances them or really generates a feeling?
There's so many examples that I go. A lot of kind of the Storming Norman moments, like with Paul and Storming Norman at the end. The Martin Luther King assassination moment is one I'm particularly proud of. I think one from a just kind of an all-out editing point of view is just kind of the ending montage in general, because with that I took the opportunity of stealing from every deleted scene in the movie to build upon it to kind of get the scale of it. So when you see with the ending, you see kind of Otis give Paul the letter, that's from a deleted scene. Some of the when you see them kind of playing around under the waterfall, that was from a deleted scene. So using all of these moments of deleted scenes are kind of to build this kind of grander opening with kind of more scale. So and again with that, it was just continuing to kind of hone it in and work it. So any footage that would come in at any point, if I could find a way of using it in the ending, I would.
And you've progressed so quickly as an editor, working as an assistant editor, and then I believe Roma was your second feature film as an editor, if I'm not mistaken. And
it was my second dramatic. I've done a couple of feature documentaries at that point as well.
Yeah, and so all the recognition that got, you were nominated at the BAFTAs, American Cinema Editors, and now to be working with Spike Lee so extensively, how has that been? Just kind of that journey you've taken over especially the last few years.
Well, it's unbelievable even to me. It's kind of nice to kind of sit back occasionally and have a beer and think about just the opportunity I'm in. I'm a film lover, just kind of to start it off. So all I wanted to be was to be, just to edit. I didn't necessarily have ambitions, or I had a dream of kind of getting to this type of feature level, but I just wanting to get into this career was a big step for me. So to kind of make it this far is incredible. And I feel very strongly that editing is an apprenticeship, and it definitely has been in my experience. So to get the opportunity to have these collaborations and to still learn and grow from them, I'm just kind of excited to see where I can kind of keep going.
And working on the American Utopia film from that Broadway musical, that's such a different kind of film. Was that a very different process of because like there's so much music involved and it's a live stage performance? How is that a different kind of editing?
It was I must admit, a lot of self-doubt early on in that, because I just didn't know if I could do it. When all of the footage came in, we kind of grouped it up. So it was a multi-camera shoot. So I had about 36 angles for some of the songs. What was great with this, with my collaboration with Spike, now it's the second film, we've already got a shorthand. And Spike wanted me at the shoot as well. So I was sitting behind him while he was sitting at the monitors watching the shoot, just taking notes. So that was my dailies. I was getting my dailies live for this. I could see the angles he was liking and how it was going. And then just locking myself in a cutting room for 2 weeks to kind of get something into shape to show Spike, where I was pulling my hair out, because I find nothing more infuriating than an empty timeline. It's very easy to talk about an edit once you've done it, but at the beginning, when all the options are there and I didn't know where to start, I did find it quite daunting. But I just had to kind of trust the progress of progressively just continuing to work on it and review the shots. And I think it was, I put a lot of extra time in, because I was still attempting it as a features editor. I wasn't trying to do anything multicam. I was watching lots of individual takes and swapping out individual ideas to find rhythms and to use rhythms of cameras to move across the stage. So I'd like to think that that kind of came out and made me kind of was a little bit more successful in the edit using that technique.
And what drew you to editing just in general as an art form in the film world? Like what inspired you to pursue this?
Well, when I was just making short films as a kid, I just remember just using my father's video camera and shooting stuff with my friends, and it was the part of the process which I felt in control of. I didn't like directing because I couldn't get the performance or couldn't get my friends to act the way I wanted them to, and all of the other stages of it. But when it was just me alone editing, that's kind of where I felt most in control, and I think where my passion for it grew from. And just how that's evolved with the collaborations and the working relationships I've had since. It's I don't want to do anything else. I'm an editor through and through with no ambitions to change course.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on this film and your continued work with Spike Lee. Look forward to whatever that is in the works. And thank you so much for talking to me about it today.
No, pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for the time.